Awesome. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Let's
Yeah.
dig into this thing. Okay, so I know last time we left our heroes, we were building a Spring Boot app. We grabbed it off of start.spring.io, and we made it, and we explored some configuration injection. We explored a little bit of what auto wiring it is. We'll dig into that a little bit more today as well. And we set up a REST controller, and then we also learned about like layers in our configuration, and that you can use multiple, and they just kind of layer on top of each other, Swiss V style. All right, so let's start looking at some of the other stuff. So people suggested that we maybe can cover some constructor injection, which I think is a great idea. It's not something I leverage as much, so I'm going to be kind of digging into it a little bit new with all of you. I know Kyle's definitely done some of it as well. So another thing I thought of that would maybe be good to stay in the Spring ecosystem before we start bringing in some other dependency libraries, like for database stuff or security, would be just different ways to kick off code, which I know has been confusing to some people. I would say most people end up writing REST controllers for everything, but there are ways that you can start code off in different areas, and these are techniques that a lot of different libraries you bring in are using behind the scenes as well, that it's good to kind of understand where they fit in the life cycle of your code or your server starting it. Let's see. And then after we get through that, if we have time, we can start to dig into database land. How does that sound? Excellent. I love it. I'm getting thumbs up all around. So constructor injection. Let's go look at what not constructor injection looks like. So not constructor injection kind of looks like this. If you remember last time, we had our main controller. It's a REST controller, so that tells Spring, hey, I want you to make an instance of this class when we start up, and I want you to throw it in my bean pool. And it has like these very specific things it's going to try and do, which is make endpoints available. So when it makes this controller, we want it to know that this controller needs certain classes to be able to be whole and have all of the tools it needs to do its job. And in this case, the one thing that we are calling out is a greetings config object of some kind. So we're saying when you make my main controller instance that I want you to stick into the bean pool, I'm expecting there to already be a greetings config object that instantiated and is available in the bean pool for me. Okay? So this is one way to look at it. However, what you're really using behind the scenes a lot of time is either constructor injection, or sometimes it's like calling reflective getters and setters behind the scenes for stuff. But it's when you can use the constructor injection, it's better because you have better control over what's visible and what's not to different things. So let's take a look at this. So let's write a constructor in Java, which it's been a little while for me, honestly. So if I say public main controller, blah, blah, and then we give it a greetings config, and then we tell it config equals config.
Let's do this on the left half.
What's up?
This dot
Oh,
config.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is about as simple of a controller as you can get, which is awesome. But before we do this, let's level set with ourselves. Let's spin this guy up and make sure it still works, because that's always a good thing to do. Again, I am using an alias defined in my bash rc file that just is calling the Gradle wrapper boot run function. And then let's go to Insomnia. And let's call our new request that we have here. That's not the right one. What did we make last time? It was none of these. Keycloak active time.
I don't remember what we did.
We made a new folder for this, but that's fine. We're just going to do this. 8080, which is the port we're running on. And then I believe we said /hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, Java COP. Perfect. That's us right there. So We are still working, which is excellent. So let's kill it, and then let's try and not break it. But breaking things is fun too. So we are no longer going to use this auto-wired anymore because auto-wired is achieving kind of what we were talking about before. What we're going to be doing instead is achieving the exact same thing using constructor injection. So there are a couple of ways this has worked in the past. I believe the way we can get it to work now is if there is a constructor and it exists, and Spring knows that you need to go ahead and make an instance of this when you start up, it should automatically find the constructor and should invoke it for you and assume everything in that constructor should also be a bean in the beans. I'm getting nods from Kyle, so I believe that is correct.
That's the way I know it. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and see if that works. Okay, and it looks like it's working, and if I run send, we get it. So awesome. That looks really nice. Now, in the past, I have avoided doing this for a couple of reasons that I think are kind of going away as time goes on, which is nice. One is that to do this in the past, you needed to also declare this guy as auto-wired, which it sounds like you don't need to do anymore, which is perfect. So I also think that there is a way, if I had two of these, like let's say that we had two different constructors going on here, config two. I don't really know what this is. This is just going to be some like random thing that we don't really care about.
Yeah.
Name. We're not even going to use it in here. We're just going to define it. So now I have two controllers, and I would imagine when this starts up, it's going to be confused because it's not going to go which one to use. And I think if I remember right, there is probably a constructor binding annotation you need to set that lets it know which one it's supposed to use on startup when you have multiples. But that's not it. Failed to instantiate, no default constructor found. So it needs a default constructor of some kind to use constructor binding, or there is a way to specify it, but I don't know what that is off the top of my head. We could go look at docs, and I know we would be able to find it. And if we want to use our time that way, we definitely can. But I have a feeling a lot of people don't want to. So here's the other thing that I want to try, because we're kind of experimenting together, because like I said, this isn't an approach I use quite as much. I hate writing constructors unless they provide me something specific that just like generated code wouldn't normally get me. The boilerplate constructor, I hate writing it. This drives my soul into the ground. So what I would suggest doing is maybe let's pair a couple of different options that we have together, which could be fun. We talked about Lombok a little bit last time, and Lombok is specifically a library that is used to help reduce a lot of Java boilerplate. And out of the box in Lombok, you get three different annotations that can all control instructors, or not instructors, constructors that you can you don't have to define, which is nice. So let's get rid of that one. Let's not have auto-wired on our config. Let's make sure, let's do a sanity check. If I were to run this right now, I would expect it to fail because it doesn't know what it needs to do. It's going to have an empty constructor as its default, and then greeting config is not going to be defined. So we start it up, and then if I run this, I get a null pointer. Perfect. That's exactly what we expected to happen. So now if I kill it, let's go up here and let's give ourselves a all args constructor. And so this is from Lombok. Again, we don't need those things up on REST controller. So this will take everything that exists as a field on this class, and it will make a constructor that is all of them. So this should, assuming everything kind of like is compiled in the right order behind the scenes, do this for us. Which it does. Excellent.
Oh, cool.
Now, you don't always have the benefit of using an all args constructor because sometimes there are things defined that are going to be set later, or they are like finals or whatever, right? The other option I don't see people use a lot that I think is a lot of fun is a required args constructor. And this will make the default constructor only be for anything that you have marked as not null. And nope, not null. non-null. There we go. Yeah. So that is a thing that's a little bit weird. Not null with a T is a constraint annotation, which we kind of used last time when we were looking at our config options where we had like min and max. You have a not blank, a not null, all that kind of stuff. But there is a non-null, which you can see comes from the Lombok package. That marks a thing as required, which interacts with the required args constructor. I do like non-null spelled N-A-A-N. A garlic non-null specifically would probably be my favorite annotation. Let's make sure this works. I'm not lying to you, and I'm not. Excellent. So this is a cool like combination of all of the approaches, I think. If we have a constructor and it knows it needs to go ahead and make one for us, perfect. All right. Do you guys feel pretty good about constructor injection stuff? Is that kind of what you were wanting to hit?
Yeah, I didn't even think of Lombok, but yeah, I think the main thing there was people see auto-wired, like just the different things they may see in the wild to understand what that's actually doing for them. Because it took me a while to understand auto-wired. It's like, oh, it's another Spring Magic. It's like, actually, this one's not as hard to understand as some of those others. And it's nice to see the different formats it may take.
Absolutely. And one thing that is good to call out here that we will get to more in testing is some people really, really like forcing this to be constructor injection because it makes your class exist outside of the Spring ecosystem a little bit better, standalone. And because of that, anytime you have something that's a little bit more standalone and is not dependent on the framework you're in, it's a little bit easier to test depending on what testing approaches you have. So some people are really, really like zealous about this because they found a lot of benefit there. Personally, I haven't found a lot of benefit there, which is why I probably haven't dug into it quite as much. But as we get into more testing stuff, maybe like 3 or 4 different sessions down the line here, that's something we should dig into a little bit. And if someone on the call has had a lot of really good experience with that, I would highly recommend that you steal the mic from me and go over it because I would be interested to know as well.
I think the main reason that I think I like constructor injection is just because I can make greetings config final. You can't change it. That's like I don't know that I ever see it happen, but in the scenario we've got right now, config could get changed to something else after the app gets started up. So
that is a great.
Again, I don't see it happen a lot, but
because let's actually dig into that because that's a pattern that I've seen that's been problematic for me in the past. So like let's say this greeting config object, not even this one, but the stuff inside of our config object that we have kind of pre-populated with all of the things from our application properties file or application YAMLs file because we're good people. Is that this stuff, the way it is set up right now, because I have an @data validate annotation, they all have setters. So if I wanted to, I could be a terrible human being, and I could say config dot set main to gray, and then this should just run fine out of the box, but we do not want it to be the case.
No, you don't want that. Yeah.
Gross.
I've seen that. You know, you get a big monolithic app, and somebody's got a config, and they say, "Oh, I need this thing to be here," so they write some code that sets that, and all of a sudden, it's like busted for everybody, and they don't realize it's.
So let's take this as a quick little case study, and let's prevent bad actors like Gray setting stuff like this. So let's go to greetings config, and let's leverage our constructor injection to make that impossible here, right? So kind of what we talked about before, instead of @data, we are going to tell it that we want a required args constructor. And then let's just set this guy as @non-null. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know if this is going to work right out of the gate. We'll see together.
We'll see. Yeah.
All right, now that I've taken away data, we don't have getters anymore. So if I were to go back here, things are going to get real angry. So what we're going to do is add getter on here, and this will by default make a getter for every single one of these. And then it's angry about @non-null. It's meaningless on a primitive.
Yeah.
That's fair, I suppose. I'm going to leave it for now just to see what happens. We can get it working, and then we can remove it and see if anything changes. All right. So now if I come here, get is fine, but set is angry, which is great. That's exactly what I want to happen.
Mhm.
Now let's see if we still work or not. No.
Mhm.
All right. Greetings config is annotated with constructor binding, but it defined as a regular bean, which caused dependency injection to fail. Update configuration until greetings config is defined. We configuration property scan or enable configuration properties. I have run into this in the past, and to be honest, I don't remember how to get around it.
Do we have to have that enable configuration property? Oh no. Sometimes I feel like I've seen that in the past where you got to stick that annotation on like the main when boot starts up, then it goes and finds all that. But yeah, I don't.
Yeah, you might be right, but I'm
Yeah.
fairly certain that that is. It's not something we should have to do, but
No.
let's try it anyway for fun, and then if it doesn't work, we can go back to what we had before. I know I've
Yeah.
gotten a version of this that works kind of the way I want to before, but I don't have it in my back pocket to kind of pull out at will because I don't remember how to do it off the top of my head. So we talked about saying enable configuration stuff.
Yeah, and like application.java or whatever.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So at enable configuration properties. And again, I'm fairly certain this is already like set up and good to go, but
Yeah.
you will find a lot of articles as you work in Spring Boot that say you need to go do things like enable configuration properties or enable scheduling or enable caching or something. And over time, a lot of those have been phased out, so you don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Especially if you're bringing in libraries that kind of assume you're working in that space already, they've already enabled it for you. So let's try this one more time. Or enable configuration properties. All right, and then we're going to try one last thing, which is taking it off of here and putting it on greetings config, which should not do anything for us, but you know, sometimes you just got to throw a Hail Mary and see what happens.
Yeah.
Nope, doesn't work. Okay. So, Kyle, your and I homework is to figure out the right way to do this before next time, because I know there's a way to do it. I've done it before. I just don't know what
Yeah.
it is. Okay, so that's what that looked like again, and then we are going to make this data again. And villains like me are free to change that in other classes if I wanted to, but don't do that. Just yeah, don't ever do that. Is another piece of advice. It's not a good idea. All right, double check that we're good to go again. Awesome. We're back to our normal state. Anything else we want to do on injection type stuff? The other things I was going to start looking at were these ways to initiate code and kick off code. And then also we haven't talked about the bean annotation at all, which I know I found confusing when I first started, which I feel like would be good for people to have as well. All right. So let's hit the @bean annotation really quick because I feel like it fits with what we're looking at right now a little bit more. You can see that we have this class annotated with @configuration. @configuration is another one of those annotations that's kind of a flag to Spring Boot that says, hey, we want to have one of these available in our Spring or in our bean pool. However, it has another very specific thing, which is I plan to also probably have methods that are declared as @bean in here, and I want you to take all of those and also make them available as things in our bean pool. Okay. And that was kind of a confusing way to say that, but let's do something really simple. So we're going to make a new record, and I don't know if people have worked with records much at all, but we're going to say public record, and this can be anything we want. We're going to call this Neil favorites. Okay, great. So this is going to be a public record, and this is basically just like one big constructor, and the string is going to be a favorite greeting. Why not? And then you just throw a couple of curlies on the end, and you have a record. This is an immutable object that you can work with. They're a lot of fun. So we have this Neil's favorites. Now, what I want to do is we're going to break things for a second. I'm going to go back to my main controller, and I'm going to say, you know what? Not only do we need a greetings config, we need Neil's favorites. All right, we're going to import it. And if we start this up, we're going to fail because there is no Neil's favorites available in our bean pool. It is defined as a class, but there's nothing letting Spring know that it needs to make one of these and make it available in our bean pool, right? And you can see that's exactly the error we get. Required, but it's not there. So instead of making a whole class, like what we could do is we could go make Neil's favorites and then we could go like pop it over into its own class and then we could like tell it it's an at component and then try and inject some stuff, right? But in this case, we don't want to do that. And especially if you have multiples of something, maybe it's not a singleton, maybe it's a list of favorites or something that you want to make available. What you can do is you can come down here and we can say generate Neil favorites. And then we can just return, oops, you know what I should do is actually make this be a real method.
Yeah.
And then we're going to return Neil favorites and we're going to give it ye.
Heck yeah.
All right. And it's angry at me and we're going to figure out why.
Undefined for the type greeting.
Really?
What? Oh, new Neil favorites.
Dude, oh yeah, you do still need to do new on
Yeah.
the record, don't you? Yep, you do. Good call. Thank you. All right, so we have that, and this is still not going to work, which is totally fine. So again, same thing. I spin it up, it'll fail with an exception. But what we can do is we can tell Spring by using the @bean annotation that I want it to run this method and take the thing that comes out of it and make it available as a thing that can be auto-wired. Okay, it's going to make it available in my bean pool for me. So you can see generate Neil's favorites is here. We're going to go to our main controller and we're going to take NF and then let's just say something like if NF does not equal null, then return NF dot favorite greeting. All right, cool. Coming back here, again, this bean is going to make it run this, take this, and stick this object in our bean pool for us. So if we start up, we should not fail this time, which we don't. And then if we call this, we do get, in fact, get back Neil's favorite greeting.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Let's spend some more time on auto-wiring. I forget that there's a lot of really cool things that you can do here and make them available. So let's hit two things that I know confuse people a lot because the majority of the time when you're working with auto-wiring, you are going to be working with things that do have singletons. There's going to be one of this class instance in your bean pool, and if you say, I want you to auto-wire something of this class, it's going to be like, great, and it's going to hand it to you and you're done. And that's kind of where the complexity ends there. But there are ways you can make it more complex and ways you can do a lot of cool stuff with it as well. So let's break things again. Do you remember how I said we could do multiples of these? I don't know if I said that, but now you get to remember it. So we're just going to name this Neil's favorites and like Neil's favorites 2. All right. And this is going to be ye and yeet. Why not? That's not really a greeting. I guess if anything, that's more of like a goodbye.
Yeah.
But we're gonna make 2 beans, and what's gonna be mad is if we look over here, we're saying I want to get 1 out of my bean pool, and I have nothing telling it like if there are multiples how to resolve that conflict, and it's going to explode. So. Excellent. And you can see here, same thing. Single bean, but 2 were found, Neil's favorites and Neil's favorites 2. So this is what I wanted to kind of show you is when you're in here and you have an @bean annotation, by default, all of your beans have names of some kind. And when you're using the @bean annotation, the name of your bean is the name of your method that you're using. There are ways around this. I know people say that Spring Boot is a lot of convention over configuration a lot of the time. All of that configuration is available to you to change. It's just that the convention is like very easy to follow if you don't want to have to go in and set the configuration all the time. So let's look at how you do this in a couple of different ways. First way is that I can just name the thing that I'm auto wiring in the same as one of these. So let's say I only want Neil's favorites 2 instead. I can come here and just name this guy the same as my beam, and this will just work.
That changed the method 26 and 27.
Oh, that's a good call. Thank you. Blindly changing things and not looking for
Yeah.
compile errors is the best
It's
way
fine.
to do that. All right. And you can see that we get Neil's favorites 2 popping out for us, which is awesome. Now, here's the other thing that's cool. Like I said, a lot of the times you are working with multiples in the bean pool, or not a lot of time, but some of the times you're working with multiples in the bean pool. Don't fight it, leverage it. So if we have multiple Neil's favorites available to us, great. Let's just say I'm expecting there to be a list of Neil's favorites in our bean pool instead of just one. All right, and we're gonna figure out what list is. Cool. And then we're just gonna say NFs. And then we are going to just grab one out of here. So in NFs, that is empty. Not. Then we come in here and we grab like the NFS dot. Is
First.
there a last? First?
That's coming.
Or we'll just
Right,
say
that
get
doesn't exist
0 for right now. Why not? There. Okay. So we have multiples, but if we wanted to, we could write something more complicated to be like grab a random one from this list and then put that instead, right? So we should see our T kind of fall off here, and perfect. Okay. So this is really powerful if you have something, especially like interfaces. So a particular like workflow I did before is I had an interface of like a message handler of some kind.
Mhm.
And then I made like 3 different message handlers that all interacted with it. But what you can do is you can say like should, or you can have a method that should process message, and then you can have a thing that's like process message. And then you can implement a bunch of these message handlers that like listen for different event types, and you don't have to go back and change the initial thing that's like looping over and calling all of your message handlers to check validity and then actually process stuff, because all you need to do is auto wire in your list of message handler objects. It knows that they should all implement should process message and process message for you. So then you just check everything, and if it says yes, it should process, call process, and then move on with your life. Which technically you could probably get yourself into trouble with, but if you're in a smaller application with a smaller team, like this type of pattern is very easily scalable. And it's nice because you don't have to like check in this message handler and then people are like, well, I did the code, I don't know why it's not working. And it's like, well, you actually have to go also add it in this other class and do this kind of stuff. But that's a pattern I really enjoy. Cool. Last thing I want to touch here, unless anyone else has any thoughts on it, is let's go back to where we just had the one that we wanted, but we have 2 defined. I said that this worked because I see. I still don't have that. There. So this guy should still just give us the 1. Yep. But let's say that we don't know the name. Or actually, well, no, we still have to know the name. But let's say that you're someone who really just at their core does not like naming their variables, something like this. Let's say I really still just wanted it to be called NF instead. And I was like, well, if you name this Neil's favorites 2, it'll work. And you're like, this is against my principles. Which is fine. Like I've worked with people like this, and that is totally legitimate. There are ways that you can tell it that you want it to be to go grab something else, right? And I do believe you have to use @AutoWired when you're doing it this way, but I could be wrong. @AutoWired takes a value. I'm trying to remember how you do this off the top of
Yeah.
your head.
Let me look.
Name of bean. Oh, @qualifier. That's it.
Qualifier. Yep. There you go.
So let's try that instead. So @qualifier. I don't even need to bring that in. And then here I can put Neil favorites 2. And I think this will work, but it's been so long since I've used this that we'll see.
Yeah.
Ooh, didn't. Using @qualifier. Okay, so I think this is probably an issue where we have pushed our constructor injection too far without actually having like a constructor setup. Or did I just misspell the bean that we wanted? Meal favorites 2. Nope, that's right. So we can do this one of a couple of ways. Really quick, I'm just going to get rid of this guy and choose these back to AutoWired because I am fairly certain this works. Yep, so that worked. Great. Or what we could do is we could go actually write out a full constructor and just throw the @qualifier on the variable that goes into the constructor. It just couldn't make the double leap of qualifier joining the Lombok constructor that we had generated behind the scenes for us. Make sense? Everybody feel good about that?
Now, can we use qualifier? Can we make Neil's favorites 2 like an application properties? So like in prod I use one and in test I use a different one. Is that a thing? I don't even know. I was trying to think in my head if I could use that as a testing scenario.
Can.
I
So
know
there are
I'm
ways you
trying
can
to
do
Google
this,
it.
but it starts using patterns that I don't like a lot. So if you guys remember back last time when I was talking about these annotations here, I said that you could do things like @value, and then you could give it a string, and then you could interpolate that string inside, and you could say greetings.main, and this
Yeah.
would auto inject for you, which is good. However, using this is a little bit gross. It looks like you can use qualifier with Lombok config.
Oh.
All right, I'm going to click on that in a second, but I'm going to finish my thought. So greetings.main here. So this is a way you can do it. However, if you wanted to do what you're talking about, Kyle, I think what you would have to do is you would need to set up something like this here. And then it would go grab it, and you would just do like greetings.neil,
Yeah.
Neil bean.
Something like that. I'll tell you which one to pull in. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it is something that you can do. I've leveraged it before. It just made me feel kind of icky inside.
Yeah.
Yep. What I would rather do a lot of these times is I would rather just make it where the bean is configured the way I want to based on the application properties using configuration properties.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go ahead and get rid of Neil's favorites. Okay. So I'm going to click on that thing that Neil sent really, really fast. Qualifier.
Looks like what we had.
It does look like what we had.
We didn't do private and final, but
Oh, Lombok.copyable annotations.
oh, I didn't see that part.
Interesting. Okay, you would have to add it to the Lombok config file,
Hmm.
which I've never done before.
I didn't try it, to be fair, but it seems like it is possible. You just
Look, I'm going to level with you. We have a little time, and we're probably not going to get to database stuff today because we found
Let's
some
do
other
it.
fun stuff to look at. So let's just do it.
first try, every try.
Lombok.
It's got 240 upvotes. It's got to be right.
Let's do it live.
Right, Lombok.copyable annotations plus equals qualifier and value. I don't want value because I don't want to promote that kind of thing. Get rid of that. Cool. Come back here. And then instead of auto-wired, we're going to call this non-null again. Well, I got rid of all of the Neil's config stuff. Need to add all that back in. There we go.
There we go.
All right, back here, non-null. Meals, favorites, NF. And we said that this would not work because NF is not one of the beans that we have defined. So just double checking that we are working with that as our state we are currently in.
Oh, we don't have the required args constructor. It's going to null
Oh,
pointer.
thank you. Good call. Good call. There we go. And you can see same error we were at before. So now if we go here and we do at qualifier and we give it Neil favorites.
This is some magic that works. Look at that.
Pretty cool. Nice.
Neat.
All right. I
Yeah.
like that. Good find.
That magically tells Lombok to take those annotations and like carry them around with it to
Mm-hmm.
the class it makes. Okay.
Excellent.
Magic, more magic on your magic.
That's more magic, I know. Yeah.
You like magic. Okay, cool. Anything else anyone wants to hit in terms of like auto wiring, constructor injection, all that kind of stuff we just went over?
I think the only thing we maybe didn't touch or I missed it, if you have two, does it work if you have two Neil's favorites and we don't do the qualifier, but you mark one of the beans as like primary?
Oh, no, we didn't do that. Let's try that.
I think
That's
there's
not a
way to,
pattern
like,
I've used a whole lot, so
I think
that's
there's
a good thought.
primary bean or something.
I think it's just primary. If I
Yeah, I think it's just that primary, I
Yeah.
think.
Indicates the bean should be given preference when multiple candidates are qualified. Yep. Nice.
I don't know what the use case for that would be. Like most of the time, if I want a REST template, give me this one. But if I want, I know that is when I've seen it. So like most of the times, if you got, yeah, you do your auth one way. 99% of the time, you want to inject this one REST template, so you mark it as primary. And then if
Yep.
you want to do the special way, then you go do the
Then you
qualifier.
use the
The
qualifier.
2% of the times where you care about that.
Exactly. Nope, I like it. That's cool. I had forgotten that was a feature, so excellent.
Yeah.
Nice call out. Cool. Anything else that you can think of? That was a really good one.
That was the only one I thought that you were going to touch on that you didn't. So that was good.
All right. I'm going to leave this stuff here. And let's go look at different ways that we can. Oh, I apparently got rid of my like text thing I had. Oh well, that's fine. Different ways that we can kick off code, because like I said, a lot of the time you are using controllers for stuff, but there are other options, and it's kind of good to know what they look like. Because of that, what I end up doing a lot of the time is I end up making like an entry points package. So you basically know if you're looking for anywhere where code was initiated at some point, it's in that entry points package. And then I'll make like a controllers under that. People are moving away from like structuring code by functionality and more by like domain anyway. So that might be something that falls out of like graces after a while, which is totally fine. That's just something I found helpful if you are already organizing your code kind of like this. So we have our controller here. Let's go ahead and make an initializer, which I haven't done in quite a while. So folder, initializers, and then new file, init .java. That's not going to be good. All right. Now, like I said, it's been a little while since I've been in this ecosystem. So there are lots of different things that you can do here. There is a whole thing we could dig into that is all the life cycle of your application in Spring. And what you can do is add listeners to all of those. So I believe you would need to implement an application lifecycle or application listener or application event. Ooh, which one is it out of the box?
I don't know if I've done this.
You haven't done this before?
I don't think so, no.
Spring boot run on startup. Excuse me. Let's see. So There is an initializing bean
Initialize.
interface that you could make if you wanted to. Application listener, I believe, is the one that I'm careful about.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's the one I've seen. Yeah.
Application listener. And then this is something that takes the type of event that you're listening for. So in our case, there are a few different ones that you could do. This one is using a context refresh event, which is usually only going to happen once when your app starts up, so that's fine. But if your context does get refreshed behind the scenes, that could be something that kicks it off again. So on application event is going to run, and then you're going to do something. So let's just go ahead and say syso, and we are going to say hello Java COP. Oh no.
Cool.
Oh no. All right. And what we should see is in our setup here.
We need a component annotation or like a
Oh,
service
we
or
do
something
need a
on
component
the.
annotation. Thank you. And Kyle, what does the at component annotation do?
It puts it in the bean pool.
It's in the bean pool.
Sure.
And if it's in the bean pool, then it knows it needs to actually like make it, and then once it's made, it like goes into other things.
Got it.
There it is, right there.
Look at that.
Yeah. So this is not always helpful, but it is helpful on like when you need to initialize some stuff. So one example of that I have is when I worked with a particular content management platform once. We had needs to basically make sure that we made 500 system users in a round robin pool that we could iterate through every time we needed to make a call to them, so we didn't get rate limited for each specific user, which is a little bit silly, but something we had to do, and was their recommended way to fix a rate limiting problem, which was ridiculous. So on our initializer, every time our app started up, we went and we checked our application properties, and we were like, oh, hey, how many of these do we need to create, and like what pattern do they need to follow? And it auto-created all of them for us. I'm not saying that's the best pattern in the world, but it is a pattern that you can use. One thing you really need to be wary of if you were doing this, or are you doing our next one that we're going to go over, which is scheduled annotations, is they are really, really nice locally when you have one instance of your app. If you scale up to multiple instances of your app, you either need to make sure that they are okay running simultaneously, or you need to make sure that only one instance is configured to run them. So, like I said, lots of different events you can do here. There's also some stuff I've seen where people take your environment variables, like before they're fully fleshed out, and they will do like some pre-processing on them. And I believe that leverages an application listener as well. Anytime you want to do something at a point in the application lifecycle, either kind of hijacking it and doing something in between something else, or doing something on it's like triggered every time you're listening for one of those. This is how you do it. And I would bet you some good dollars that behind the scenes, what they're doing is they're just auto-wiring a list of application listeners and then looking for ones that have the same event type that is being fired right now, just like we were talking about earlier for message handlers. Cool. Any questions or thoughts on like our application listener stuff? Otherwise, we can hit scheduling real quick.
Cool.
All right. I have a love-hate relationship with this scheduled annotation, and we can dig into some of that baggage in just a second here. But let's say scheduled tasks file, task, Java, and again, capitalize your things. Excellent. All right, so we're going to make this an at component as well, so we don't like shoot ourselves in the foot again. And then down here, we're going to make a public void execute or whatever. It doesn't really matter what it's called, to be honest with you. And we are going to say, so this is our task executing. And you know what I'm going to do? Instead of using syso here, I'm going to use the SLF4J Lombok annotation, which automatically makes a logger for us. Then I can just say log.info instead. Cool. So if we do this, nothing's going to happen, which is not very exciting. But if we add an at scheduled annotation, and you can throw this at the method level, there are a couple of different options you can do out of the box here. Three, I'd say. One is you can give it cron if you wanted to, which is totally legitimate if you want to run it more like based on time. I end up using fixed delay and fixed rate most of the time. Fixed rate is going to try and fire off every single time it hits the amount of time that you've like waited between. So if you say I want to run this every 5 minutes, it's going to kick it off every 5 minutes. I do believe that I can't remember off the top of my head if one runs for 6 minutes, if it will try and kick off one 5 minute mark again, or if it will wait till the 6 minutes is done and then kick off the one that's like queued up behind it. I don't know if it queues it or parallelizes it. It's one of those two. Not sure which off the top of my head. But fixed delay is kind of the opposite of that. So if we had one that ran for 6 minutes, it would wait the amount of time that you have from the end of the last one till it starts the next one. So it would run for 6 minutes, wait for 5 minutes, run for X amount of time, wait for 5 minutes, run for X amount of time. Yeah. So let's just say fixed delay, and we'll give this a number of milliseconds that we want it to do. All right, this was our initializer thing, and we should be able to see in just a second that executing. However, do you remember how I, in my infinite wisdom, said that you usually don't need to do the enable thing? I believe you still need to do enable for scheduled stuff.
Yeah, enable scheduling. Yeah.
There it is, right there. And you can see it popping out every second.
There you go. I'm looking on the internet and it's saying fixed rate should be used when you want each execution to be independent of each other.
Okay. So I would imagine if it has the threads available in the scheduled task thread pool, it will probably try and parallelize them.
Yeah, it says by default it won't parallelize, but you can enable async and throw an async annotation on it, and it'll magically run it async. Otherwise, it'll wait till the other one's
That
done.
makes sense. And that is something that we could dig into later if we wanted to. That has a bunch of gotchas around it, which is the enable async annotation in Spring Boot.
Yeah.
I have used it well, but I've used it poorly more often than I've used it well. So one thing that I want to do, because we're coming up on time here anyway, I want to impart some wisdom of doing scheduled tasks poorly in the past. One thing that you definitely need to know, and this might have changed since I've run into this, but here's our thing right here. This is our task executing, and then let's throw a new runtime exception. Dead. All right. Now, have you noticed something? Or more importantly, do you not notice something? Which is that our schedule stopped entirely. So what this does is this will start your schedule for you. But after that point, if you ever bubble up an exception all the way to the top of the method that is annotated with that scheduled, your schedule's gone. So the first thing I do every time I write an at scheduled annotation now is I wrap the entire thing in a try catch. All right, we're going to take this guy here. Exception E. It's not going to like this. That's fine. And then you can say log.error, and then you can give it E. Does it need some message to go along with this?
Yeah.
Okay, but doing this should make it where our schedule continues even though we are throwing an error every second. And you can see, well, you maybe can't see because it looks the same, but we are getting longer and longer every time.
Yeah, the time on the log message is changing a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is probably the biggest piece of advice I have for scheduled annotations is make sure that you do that. The other thing that is a little obnoxious for scheduled annotations is that this number is slightly hard to change, like depending on environments, and it's slightly hard to turn on and turn off depending on environments. There are ways to do it, but I don't love any of them, is the moral of the story here. What I've done in the past that I did enjoy is I made a wrapper around a scheduled task. And just like everything in Spring Boot, these annotations are basically helpers or behind the scenes things that you can set up yourself if you wanted to. So what I've done in the past is instead of making a scheduled, I've made an annotation that does like the context refresh event or your like application initializing in some way. And I have added a scheduled task to my like task scheduler in Spring. So I think, yeah, task scheduler. And I haven't done this in like 5 years, so I do not remember how to do it off the top of my head. But I believe you can say schedule and you give it a runnable, so anything that extends runnable, and then you can give it your rate or your delay or whatever it is that you want to do. And that way you can wrap a little bit of logic around it first if you wanted to. So I will often, and by often I mean I have done this in the past, is instead of running at scheduled, we'll just make a component, and then on the the post construct of the component or in the constructor of the component, I will add to the task scheduler instead. And then have some configuration properties that I've injected using configuration properties here that will do all of the things I want to do, like enabling or disabling or like changing schedules based on what environment you're in. Cool. We're at 5:01. I know we kind of ran out of time. We didn't get to database stuff yet. I do want to hit database stuff next time, but there were some cool things here that I'd forgotten about that I think was nice to spend a little bit of time on. Any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns at all?
Very good for winging it. You did a good job.
Yeah, very well.